Hello. Good evening, everybody. If I can invite you to take your seats. The guys at the back, will you please come up and take your seats? There's 2 more seats here and a seat at the front. So guys, we're just going to get started. Thanks for making to this event. Really happy to see everybody's faces because I know you've all had a long day with work or whatever else you do. So this event is about building on the blockchain, so it's going to be quite technical, and it's for people who are interested in about the technology, and if you're interested in about being crypto rich or building an ICO, I suggest there's an exit out there at the back, so you may take your leave if you do not want to learn about the technology itself. So my name is Hui Chi and I work for Opera Incubator down in Cork. We incubate non-ICO startups. So 2 of the startups that we incubate are BitCart, which is a platform for trading gift cards and cryptocurrencies. And then the second startup is Festy, which is a wearable wristband used at events and festivals using crypto payments. So one of our speakers from Festy will be here tonight, Ronan Sanford. And then 2 other speakers are Oleg Gurko from Dash, which is a cryptocurrency, and Guillermo, am I right?
Close enough, yeah.
I just call you G.
Yeah.
So G from Deloitte, who is a technology consultant from Deloitte Blockchain Lab in here. Thanks also for hosting us tonight and providing the beers and pizza. Thank you Dash for providing some of the goodies and being our sponsor for the meetup. You guys can grab some notebooks and pens over here after the event. So one thing I'm going to tell everybody is to switch your phone on silent, if that's okay. You can take as many pictures as you want and tweet at us at Opera Incubator using the hashtag Opera Events. So I'm going to introduce the speakers now, and how it's going to work tonight is that the 3 speakers will come up and do their presentation without me interrupting. After, we'll leave the Q&A to the audience, so we'll bring them all back to the stage and you can ask them any questions you want. So the first speaker I have is Ronan from Festy. which is one of the teams that I work with. So he's joined the team since November. His previous experience lies in gaming development for corporate companies. So now he's joined a startup to try something different. And it's the same with Oleg Gurko here from Dash as well. He used to work for Amazon and Google as a system administrator from Right. And has also now joined a startup. So it might be the trend now to join a startup, I don't know. And then lastly, we have G from Deloitte, which is a big corporate, to talk about how they've implemented blockchain for one of their clients. So now I'll leave the speakers to do their presentation, and we can do a Q&A after.
Just take some water before. So basically, I joined Festy in November at that place actually, in Cancun for DevCon 3. But before that, actually, I'm still kind of working on it. It's a game platform using Ethereum called Etherplay. But anyway, here, so when I met the team in Cancun, I was instantly hooked up to start to work on a self-sovereign payment system. So you could see a lot. You can, I mean, I don't know if you are in the crypto space, but you might have heard of all these cards that allow you to use Bitcoin through the Visa network. I think Festy is basically not to use that, to give the user control over their fund. So why blockchain? Basically, it stems from that. It's to give control to the user. So blockchain is a big word, and it's basically because it's an ecosystem. It's not just one thing. It's not just Bitcoin or not just Dash or whatever. It's an ensemble, and it all starts. Or maybe there is all, of course, there is computer it's themselves, but at least there is public key cryptography. This is one of the base building block of it, which allows to control your data, being able to encrypt it, but also being able to sign it, to say this is from me and not anybody else. And then there is blockchain, of course. Satoshi Nakamoto consensus, as it's called, there is new ones now being invented, was the revolution. And what it brings is really the scarcity of data. If you think about data, you can always copy it. That's basically what BitTorrent is for, and you can copy, and that infinitely. And blockchain is a revolution, is that we now can represent data which you cannot copy. The only way to send someone Bitcoin, you have to transfer. You cannot keep it. And that's really the key innovation. And the other piece is the off-chain layers. Because basically blockchain is a trade-off between security and scalability. So off-chain layer allows you to kind of bypass that. But I guess I went a bit ahead already because, yeah, I wanted to mention that later. But basically, anyway. So Festy aimed to create a user-friendly, decentralized payment system for the masses in one big sentence, I would say. But there is problems with this ecosystem. I mean, if you think about it, we are maybe in the 70s of the internet or something like that. We are very early. We are definitely not in the 90s as we could hear often. And there is three main problems: user experience and scalability. And actually, the third one in some ways is user experience, but I think it's so unique that it's actually what makes encryption not available as well in the beginning of email, is that it gives user a big responsibility. So the first problem is payment. So I mean, if you are used to cash, it's very convenient. Credit cards have insurance protection and all this stuff. And as soon as you go to blockchain, suddenly you are on your own. And of course, you can go to an exchange, but then you are not anymore in control, and you are basically back to the same starting point, and you are missing the point, because while there is a clear benefit for society as a whole to get user in control, adoption requires an user experience that is better than the one accustomed to. And there is another aspect of it, which is volatility, which is maybe only a current problem, but to adoption, it cannot be just put aside. And the scalability problem cannot be avoided if you want a payment system. So yeah, as I say, like blockchain is a trade-off. So it will require, whatever we come up will require both off-chain and on-chain solution. And there is lots of options currently being built as we speak. And so Festy is not going to reinvent everything, so we are looking closely at what is happening around us. So the third problem was user responsibility. And I mean, I don't know if you know, but if you have manage your own fund, you might use them on exchange, but this is not cryptocurrency, this is just another bank. So if you experience it, you will realize that, yeah, if you lose your private key, you lose everything. And nobody can, so there is solution around that, and this is basically to have some sort of backup. There is few names out there, like there is Uport, for example, in the Ethereum space, is to be able to socially distribute your keys and be able to recover from few of them without them being able to recover your keys. But all of these solutions, you need to make sure that the user is not losing control, because I mean, if you put your private key on your Gmail account, then you are missing the point. So this is a very difficult problem to solve. So Festy approach, so we basically it's a multiple phase to it. So the first thing is a minimal viable product we are building, which will be ready in March, 29th of March to be exact. And it's basically to have a useful product, to bring awareness to sovereignty on blockchain technology in general. So it's the first phase. It won't use all the features we plan to do. The user won't be on the full control, but it's one way to introduce them and to bring slowly, instead of starting with a big thing which is not usable, start with something usable and start from there. So it's in a closed, secure environment, which the name comes from at event and festival. So the goal is basically to offer a seamless payment experience. But the long-term vision is to bring a payment system where users are in control. And using the same technology we use in the festival, which has been this kind of smart card, where your fund, your private key resides there and you are in control of your fund. But this is not a Visa card. So it means if you lose, you cannot just go back to your bank and say, oh, I lost now. This is, you take care of the responsibility. Hopefully we will have a system that will allow you to lose it and bring it back. But that will be because of your social network, basically a decentralized backup system. So also, I think it's a transition, but it's a stable coin. So we will need something stable for people to be able to, especially for the vendor. If you think about it, the vendor will have to pay, as a transition, will have to pay using fiat currency. So we need a way so that he doesn't need to incur loss. And there is solution out there, so we are investigating them as well. And of course, on top of that, we will need an off-chain network for the transactions themselves. So this is like, for those we know, is like a payment channel. And then we will of course have to integrate with a merchant, with maybe the classical hardware that is used for credit card. We could reuse them, but having with our own cards. So that's kind of the general overview of Festy. Thank you.
thank you everybody for coming here. I'm Oleg Gilkom, Dash core developer, and I'll present a short overview what is Dash and what's going on here. Okay. No, the wrong way.
Other way.
Okay. So let's. Dash is a cryptocurrency. It's built on the same technology as Bitcoin is built. So it uses blockchain, and but it has some quite unique features. One of the main features is that it has some self-governance. And Dash project is self-funded. We are not. We didn't get any money from investors. We didn't perform any ICO. All the project is funded by Dash itself. Also, Dash has a quite enthusiastic community. Also our team is interested in making not just cryptocurrency, but a global payment system that is useful for everybody. Here I will present some technical details, what Dash is and how it works. Little bit of history. So Dash started in January of 2014 as some kind of experiment. First it was called Xcoin, and this experiment started with several mishaps. One of them was that essentially because of a bug in the code, the reward for mining was too high. And it was like this for several days. And after that the bug was fixed. But since then we have a stigma that some people think that Dash was originally a scam. It was not, it was just a bug. Then when the bug was fixed, the founder of the project, Ivan Duffeld, asked the community whether to restart the project from, to start blockchain from zero. But community overwhelmingly rejected this idea. And that's interesting that this original, and by the way, some exchange that was used to trade Dash was hacked, and some amount of Dash was dumped to Poloniex and sold to lots of people. Also not very good for, for cryptocurrency at the beginning. But at that time, Dash was quite cheap, and surprisingly, that there is even opinion that this mishap caused a more even distribution of Dash among many people. So unlike Bitcoin, where still there are some huge shareholders holding most of the Bitcoin. In Dash, distribution is much more even, and much more people get share of Dash. Later, later Xcoin was renamed to Darkcoin, and in 2015 it was renamed to Dash because Darkcoin was associated more with dark market and stuff like that, not sounding very well. And the idea of project was not to supply money for drug dealers or some illegal businesses, but to make convenient payment system. In 2017, interest in cryptocurrencies, including Dash, grew significantly, and that led to significant rise of prices. And this allowed our distributed autonomous organization to expand significantly. So it allows to expand teams and I started working for Dash since May 2017. So Dash is Dash code based is based on Bitcoin code based, but it has completely different blockchain. Significant part of code base is shared with Bitcoin, and recently there was quite a big effort to synchronize Dash code with Bitcoin code base, like to import useful stuff from Bitcoin. It has similar protocol, but it uses different port number, and of course there are lots of Dash-specific messages in this protocol. Block format is also similar to Bitcoin's one, but also there are significant differences. First, we didn't adopt this SegWit approach that Bitcoin used recently for scalability. Instead of that, we just increased block size to 2 megabytes. Because we are not interested much in politics, we just decided to scale things, and master nodes voted overwhelmingly voted for that. I will talk about master nodes a little bit later. It uses different algorithm for computing hash of block. So essentially, it's 11 hashing algorithms chained together. And very important difference is that reward from mining doesn't go completely to miners. It's shared. 45% goes to miners, 45% goes to masternode owners, and 10% goes to governance for public good, essentially. So now about Dash-specific features that cannot be found in Bitcoin. For the beginning, scary part, sporks. Essentially, it's a mechanism to make hard forks of blockchain easy. If there is some change in consensus algorithm, then usual approach is to add a conditional in the code, like if the block number is higher than this, then this feature is active, otherwise it's not. And the block number is selected somewhere far in the future to allow all the nodes to upgrade. In Dash, there is features can be turned on and turned off from some kind of by some kind of control message. So Dash node software trusts some public key and private key for this public key is held by developers. So if a new version is introduced, new features can be turned on gradually when we see significant adoption, like if majority of the nodes upgraded to new version, we can send a message to turn on the new feature. And most important, if something goes wrong after that, we can turn it off again. And there were a few instances when this became very useful. So we are not afraid of breaking changes. We are not afraid of hard forks because we can introduce them in a safe way. Everybody needs to trust some control center to turn on and off some features. But on the other hand, you trust our code anyway, right? And if you don't trust, feel free. And they are rewarded for that. In order to start a master node, you need to freeze 1000 Dash. And the input where this exact amount is frozen is actually masternode identifier. 45% of all mining rewards goes to masternode owners and distributed evenly between masternodes. But to run a masternode, you don't need to have a private key for your account holding 1000 Dash on masternode itself. So if a host running your masternode is somehow exploited, attacker can stop your masternode, but this attacker cannot steal your 1000 Dash because masternode has a secondary key, and message to start the masternode is broadcasted from. So there is a hot client that actually holds this collateral amount, and this node broadcasts a message to containing public key, secondary key of your master node, and this way network accepts this master node. But master node itself doesn't need to send this message. So when you start master node, a message called master node announce is broadcasted through the network and relayed by all participating nodes. And this way, network knows that this node is special, it's a master node. And on the regular basis, master nodes broadcast ping messages that essentially saying, like, I'm still alive. So the network knows that this master node is still alive and functional. If master node doesn't broadcast this message for some long period of time, I don't remember, I think maybe 3 hours, then, okay, this master node needs a restart. Master nodes are perform special functions that needed by governance, instance send, and private send. And they are rewarded for that, because a master node, also one more condition, very important to run master node, it needs to have a public IP address. So what is governance? 10% of mining rewards goes to governance. Anybody can submit a proposal to Dash Network. This proposal contains 3 pieces of information. A URL of description of your proposal, what you essentially propose, Dash address to pay to, and amount to pay to for this proposal. Every time you submit a proposal, you burn 5 Dash. This is needed to prevent spam, essentially. And then, if then master nodes can vote for this proposal or against it. And once this proposal gets some majority of votes, so the formula is votes for minus votes against, and this amount should be more than 10% of master nodes. Then this proposal is approved, and you will eventually receive payment for that. So every time a new block is mined, 10% of mining rewards is put aside. And approximately once a month, a super block is created, or essentially a series of super blocks that contain payments to proposals from this 10% accumulated during that month. And that's interesting that this is exactly the way how we finance ourselves. So our team just submits proposals for further Dash development, and most of masternodes vote for this proposal. So that's how we fund ourselves. But if you have a better idea, if you want to create something better on top of this network, right? A better node software, or you have some idea how to improve it, feel free to submit a proposal. And if masternode owners vote for this proposal, you'll get financing for that. Another important feature of Dash is instant send. So the big problem of other cryptocurrencies is that there is significant delay between sending transaction and receiving enough confirmation that this transaction was actually received. So, for example, you can't use Bitcoin to buy, I don't know, a cup of coffee, because you'll have to wait for several hours until there is enough confirmations. And depending on your transaction fee, you can pay big transaction fee, and that costs like several cups of coffee, and then maybe your transaction will be mined quicker. In Dash, if you really need to make a quick transaction, there is instant send for that. And it's really quick, like 2-3 seconds, that's it. How it works? Dash still uses the same similar mining procedure as Bitcoin. So there is a delay until the block, your transaction goes to the block. Then you need several confirmations because to be sure that there is no alternative blockchain that makes this block invalid. But you can create a transaction lock request. So essentially you choose, so a master node quorum is selected, and this quorum is based on some kind of hash function that contains information about your transaction hash, and also master node. So for each master node there is a function that some kind of hash function from transaction hash and master node ID. And then the nodes with highest score, like 10 nodes are 10 master nodes are selected for this quorum, and they vote for this transaction lock request. And if majority of these master nodes vote for this transaction lock request, then this transaction lock is accepted by the whole network, and it's forbidden to create to relay a transaction that conflicts with this one, or to mine a block that contains a conflicting transaction. So if you really want to double spend, don't try it this way, it won't work. And by the way, recently some clever exploit to this algorithm was discovered by one of our team members. The problem is that if you have a few millions euro, you can, using this hash function, you can pre-calculate master node IDs and create several master nodes that have higher score than all other master nodes for this particular transaction. So, so you could, for example, send some money for, I don't know, for some goods, and when a merchant accepts receiving this money, you can, this way, using specially rigged master nodes, create and vote for conflicting transaction lock request, sending that amount of money to somebody else or to yourself. So what we did, using this Spork system, once this exploit was discovered, we are pretty sure that nobody used this, but it was discovered, so we turned off instant send until the new version is released. In the new version, this algorithm to calculate this score of master node was changed to include also hash of a block, like 4 blocks later than the transaction that activates master node. So you can't pre-calculate master node ID and you can't use this exploit anymore. So instant send is a new version was released, instant send was enabled, and all is working pretty well. If for some reason your transaction lock request times out, not enough votes or something, okay, no problem, because it's just transaction lock request. After that, you still have to send this transaction normal way. Okay, another distinctive Dash feature is private send. Private send is a service for that is needed for privacy. In Bitcoin, you can actually track down all the chain of transactions leading to some account. So where money can come, where they go. You don't usually know who owns these addresses on the path, but still you can get some information or a track, or if, for example, you know that this address is address of some kind of exchange, then you can track down who eventually sent this transaction. So Dash provides built-in mixing service. Actually, there are also mixing services for Bitcoin, but they are centralized, provided by some third parties, and you need to trust this party. In Dash, private send is built in to the protocol itself, and also master nodes are involved in that. To start mixing session, you need to find 2 other users that want to exchange exact amount of Dash with you. How can you do this? Usually people have different amount of Dash. Very simple. All the amount of Dash you want to mix is split into some fixed denominations. Essentially 10 Dash, 1 Dash, 1/10 of Dash, and 1/100 of Dash. Each denomination will be mixed with exact amount of Dash from other participants. Then a collateral transaction, so you split this amount and send to different addresses belonging to you. And also an address for some small fee is created for that. Then you select any master node you like. Usually it's done in a random way, but excluding master nodes that you were using recently for mixing to prevent some tracking from adversary master nodes. And then master node, so you can either create mixing pool or join mixing pool. And then master nodes put you in mixing queue until others join the same mixing pool. Once there are enough participants joining this mixing pool, so it requires 3 for one mixing round, then master node creates a transaction that has inputs from your accounts. From your accounts, so from your account and from 2 other participants' accounts. And it contains outputs to your account and 2 other participants' accounts. But these addresses are different. They are generated as new. And once this transaction is created, it's sent to all participants for signing inputs, and then once all participants checked that this transaction is actually contains your input, it contains output for your address, Okay, then this transaction is broadcasted by master node using some special message because so master node doesn't pay for this transaction fee for this transaction. And that's it. Mixing is complete. One mixing round. Then you perform several more mixing rounds, and that's it. Nobody knows where your funds are gone. And your new accounts got funds from somebody else. This is actually quite important feature because in an open ledger like a blockchain, you need somehow to protect yourself from criminals who can analyze blockchain and try to extort some money if they find that you have lots of coins, or from some repressive governments that try to find who finances, I don't know, some dissidents and stuff like that. So this feature is quite useful and or, by the way, for masternode owners themselves. Not everybody wants to be associated with some masternode because now masternode costs a lot of money. So yeah. Okay, and some. So these are distinctive features that Dash currently has. And now I want to tell some words about what we are going to do, like what are further areas of development. So our idea is to make Dash to be a global payment system as convenient for regular user as, I don't know, PayPal or other your favorite internet payment system. In order to do this, so it's all about user interface, you know. So the idea is to have some kind of contact list, and to instead of entering like all those crypto hashes of accounts to send money to, you will just use contact list in a convenient way and send money or request money from somebody else. To have very simple integration with for merchants, and very important thing, to be able to run light clients that do not have the full blockchain. So there are already some light clients that depend on some servers that you have to trust, and these servers in turn have full blockchain and full featured nodes. The idea is to make masternode network to serve light clients. So you don't need to synchronize the full blockchain. You just fire up some client. It may be even a web client written in JavaScript. This client finds out a list of masternodes. It selects probably several masternodes to avoid the case if some masternode is actually some kind of rigged, or and then it can use them to perform all the payment functions. In order to do this, accounts are needed. So look how, for example, PayPal works. You have PayPal account and you use it for everything. And others, like merchants, just use your charge your PayPal account, not your credit card. But In PayPal, there is a centralized storage of all these accounts, and all this infrastructure belongs to one legal entity. The idea of evolution, evolution is a code name for this project. So most likely it will be, when it will be released, it will be called something different, but this is just the code name for the project. So the idea is to have accounts in blockchain. So we can register an account, and you can have some data associated with this account. But it would be unnecessary burden on nodes of the network to store this data in blockchain itself, because blockchain is replicated on all the nodes. That's it's too much storage. So so another part of this project is to create distributed storage for user data. Of course, all this data will be encrypted. So it's essentially like a cloud, but not belonging to one entity, but distributed through the internet. And but you still need some data in the blockchain. Essentially, it will be a crypto hash of your data in this L2 storage. And once you change your data, of course, crypto hash of your data will change as well. So there will be a special kind of transactions that don't move money from one account to another, but that change the crypto hash of the data associated with your account. To avoid confusion with normal transactions, we call them state transitions. This is just a high-level overview of what's going on currently. The final goal is to have really easy-to-use distributed global payment system that is easy to use for users, that is easy to use for merchants to integrate into their systems. And also these blockchain accounts could be used for authentication or on merchant side, for example. Like, currently on some sites you can have like login with Google, login with Facebook, and there will be also probably another button, login with Dash. And a little bit about my work on this project. So I'm more on network side of things. So my idea is to write a modular networking backend. And recent networking refactoring was quite beneficial for this, because it led to much more modular networking code. And the goal of this modular networking backend is to be able to plug in backends for different network protocols. It can be privacy-based protocols listed here. Actually, Tor is already supported, but not with modular backend, but built in. So it will be a very good case study for modularizing protocol. But not only privacy-enabled overlay networks, but it can be anything. What about Dash over Bluetooth or NFC or any new networking layer that will come up in nearby future? We don't even know what it can be. So will be. I think it would be interesting. It would be good to be prepared for that. This is not a big project. It's just actually my own personal work. So it's one-man project. It's not a part of big evolution work, but I think that it's still important. Okay, so some references. If you want to have more information, there is main project site, there is development documentation, and to learn more about how a masternode quorum is created, for instance, and how mixing is performed in private send. There are some presentations here, so you can access slides after this talk and use these links. That's it so far. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. Just before I start, for clarification, my name is Guilherme Campos. I don't expect to be able to pronounce that, so you can call me G if you wish to. As was said before, I'm a blockchain developer here at the lab. I'm going to do a short and sweet presentation around our first production implementation around blockchain. And I'm going to be joined here by my colleague, Kim Gilbert. He's a business analyst here. He's just going to do a quick intro around what we actually do here in the lab, and then after that I'll jump on to the actual presentation.
Cheers. So, hello. I wasn't good enough for the photos and make the pretty picture. I'll kick things off kind of fairly high level what the lab does. So my name again is Keane Gilbert. I'm a business analyst. So the lab is split in two, business and tech. So what we mainly offer to our clients is end-to-end delivery. So we like to think of ourselves as a one-stop shop for blockchain. We're mainly focused in the financial services area, but we're slowly moving away outside of FS, mainly because regulation is a tough beast to tackle in financial services. It's an industry that's over-regulated. So our goal is to move away from that into areas not under-regulated but easier to enter. So like the supply chain is the main area that we're entering at the moment. These two gents here are the guys who lead the blockchain team. So just on the left there, it's David Dalton. He's head of financial services and our blockchain co-sponsor. And then on the right, some of you may have heard of Laura Keogh. He's our blockchain lab lead, and he leads the blockchain lab for EMEA. So Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And we're the Centre of Excellence for blockchain for that region. So what does the lab do? And we like to think we do a lot. Mainly, a big selling point of the lab is supporting the ecosystem. So a lot of work like this is something we enjoy doing and giving back, because we feel the only way for the ecosystem to grow is for us to give and support it. Eminence work is a massive part of, or a massive element of what we do. We find it's a good way to educate clients on what blockchain is, and more importantly, what blockchain isn't. You would be surprised when the clients come in, head of strategy, head of digital for large banks, and still think Bitcoin, blockchain is the same thing. I won't name banks for legal reasons, but that's a battle we're still at. I know the use case Guilherme's going to talk about later on. A lot of you from a tech perspective might think that is not the best use case for blockchain. But it's a way for the ecosystem and the banks and our clients to get a taste for the technology, to dip their toe in the water, let's say, and build up to that live production. Education, again, stuff like this is what we enjoy doing. So again, it kind of goes back to the lab split in two, business and technical. So we're a core team of 25 at the moment, but our goal is to reach 50 come the end of the year. So we are hiring. Please feel free to talk to myself on the business side or Guilherme. I'm happy to provide more information on that front. And then solutions. So the lab as a whole. So we've 5 spokes. Here is basically the hub for EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa. We have one in Singapore, we have one in New York. I think we've one opening in Malaysia, no, Hong Kong. Again, 3 hub labs, like I mentioned, ecosystem partners, so there's 12 head guys who basically set the direction for blockchain on the global level, and then 15 active POCs for the lab alone. And then at global level, outside of the blockchain for Deloitte, we're obviously a consulting firm, audit, tax, nothing as glamorous and exciting as blockchain, but it pays the bills. We're in 150 different countries. And then again, a global headcount of 260 consultants, blockchainers, auditors. And then I think I'll pass it to Guillermo. I won't take up too much of his valuable time.
Thank you, Dean. We developed this work a couple months back. It was our first production implementation of blockchain within Deloitte. It was a major milestone because, as Keen mentioned, clients come in, they like to know about the technology, they like to test it out, but when it comes time to actually move into their live systems, it's hard to do it. But the NVGL decided to do it. Just a bit of background, so the NVGL, they're a certification company, they issue certificates for a variety of stuff. And they came down and they were interested in exploring the technology. With that said, we did our normal approach. We have this work approach of 16 weeks, is it? With the clients, we do workshops, we do design thinking sessions, and then we move into development and deployment. The interesting thing about this is that the first meeting we had with the NVGL, we were handed this book from them. And I thought it was quite interesting to have it here because the book is named Building Trust, which is the whole idea behind blockchain. And I'm not lying about this, the book is actually there in the back if you want to check it after. And yeah, so this was our first blockchain implementation going live into production. As expected, this is supposed to be a technical presentation, but this is a Deloitte product, and there are some parts of it that I might not be able to comment on. I'll try to do my best to be tell as much as possible. Let's put it that way. I have just a short video. I thought it would be interesting for you to get an idea of what the project is. And there is no sound. Which? So moving forward, so as you might have guessed from the video, basically what the NVGL is doing is they're throwing their certifications into the blockchain. That's the high-level approach to it. So we work with them. We try to work out on this specific use case around the term is business assurance. And the idea was so that the NVGL could upload the certificates into the blockchain and provide an extra layer of trust and security over that certificate, because these are very expensive things. There's counterfeiting as well around this space, and this seemed to be like a perfect fit. There's three types of users on the system there. Of course, there's the NVGL admin sort of user. the customers of the NVGL that actually purchase the certificates, and then there's the customers of the customers that need to verify if they want the quality of that certificate itself. And then the benefits, I guess pretty much everybody's heard this before, but so you have the immutability where you know for sure that the data that's there, it's correct, assuming that the NVGL actually was the one uploading it, which is because we built the system and it's reliable to that extent, hopefully. There's visibility, so there's the traceability around the data on the blockchain. I guess you're all familiar with that. The interesting thing about doing a blockchain project is that we need to integrate this with legacy systems and previous systems that they still have, which sometimes can be hard. But given the simplicity of this use case, we managed to go around that pretty well. And then scalability. The first batch of certificates that we had to upload to the system was around 100,000, I think, which this was a one-off sort of upload, so it wasn't a big issue in terms of time to take. But in a day-to-day basis, we don't have problems with scalability related to the system. And then so we delivered on that the base functionality, which is uploading the certificates into the blockchain. There's a user interface where people can check the certificates, and then there's an extra sort of a high-level reporting tool around number of certificates, from where they are to which companies they're issued to, and so on and so on. So they came to us and we gave them what they wanted. We developed a blockchain platform that saves and validates the certificates that they're issued by them, and which allows the users to check their status as well. As with any other blockchain implementation, we have the traceability of those specific certificates, the changes that were made, who made them, and when. And then this last point around the reporting capabilities. Just on that last point there, this is a high-level overview of the architecture used for this specific project. As expected, there's a lot of information that does not go onto the blockchain. I imagine that any blockchain developer here already has come to understand this, given to the scalability issues and also data protection and security. You cannot just throw everything onto the blockchain. So we have a database supporting the whole system, internal APIs, external APIs, blah, blah, that's your day-to-day things. And then there's a front end. I'll show some pictures around that. Technically speaking, as I said, we can't throw all the information onto the blockchain itself. So there's a number of data points that are actually sent to it, but also what we do is we hash all the information related to the specific certificate, and that hash goes onto the blockchain, and that's what's used to match and try to verify that the certificate is actually the one that the client paid for and its status and so on. A couple of images. So this is the default landing page for the certificates. Reporting, more reporting, and this is the last point. I think it was a very interesting thing. We managed to very well integrate this into the NVGL's day-to-day work. So it's not like if the consumer had a lot of problems using this new platform, it actually facilitated their lives. Because right now, whenever the NVGL issues the certificates, they'll get a QR code on their document. What that QR code does, and it's not the case for this one, it sends the user onto the certification page from the NVGL with their certificates, with the information about the certificate, and it's a way for them to validate that whatever is given to them by the NVGL is actually true, and to also check the status on that. As you can imagine, this is a very simple use case. As Keen mentioned before, It's really hard to move forward with high-profile, big projects into production. So this was actually a good thing. And although it's a simple use case, it's extremely valuable for the NVGL itself. It brings value to them and to the customer, and it facilitates the whole verification process of the certificates. One technical point about this is this was implemented on a private blockchain. There are reasons for that, but there are discussions going around about doing a second phase of this project, and with that expanding the system to other certification companies or third-party providers. And with that as well, maybe moving into a public implementation. And that would be seamless because the whole system was developed and could be easily deployed onto the public Ethereum blockchain. And as I said, short and sweet, thank you very much. And questions?
So you weren't meant to see that, but this is our other events. Our 21st of March Berlin workshop is for developers. It's decentralizing design with the blockchain. So it's a full day workshop that's going to help you develop on the blockchain with industry experts. Our MVP launch for Festy will be on the 29th of March in Cork at the Woodford. And then our other meetup events are in April and May, one in Amsterdam and one in London, as you can see there. So I hope you can make it. So right now I'm just going to invite all the speakers up. So if anybody has some questions that you can ask them, and if you can be specific and tell them who the question is for, that would be great. So my colleague Paul is going to go around with the microphone. Oleg?
Oh, sorry.
Ian?
Yeah.
Question at the back here.
Hey, thanks for the great presentations. This one is for Festy. It's just when you're building a new platform altogether, are you caching on the open source tools, or are you attempting to do something of your own? Since being a startup, it's always,
Yeah, so I guess it's both really. I mean, the plan is not to build another blockchain. So already the plan is to use as much as possible and try to basically only do what is necessary.
Thanks.
Nice question for Oleg. Oleg, just wondering a couple of things. Why do you use two separate layers in Dash? One for the mining, one for the transactions. And the second question is, how do you deal with the, pretty volatile fluctuations in transaction fees that appeared with Dash over the last 6 months?
Okay, so we don't use transactions are mined the regular way. So they go to blockchain the same way as in Bitcoin. Do you mean this approach of L2 storage in evolution? It's not implemented yet. The idea is it's not for transactions, it's for user data, data for user accounts. Because you don't need, in blockchain you have the whole history of all transactions. For user account data, you don't need the full history, you need only the current state. So, and this data actually needed for a user. Most of this data will be encrypted, so only this user can access this data. So essentially it's a cloud, but it's not a cloud owned by one entity. It will be a distributed cloud for everybody to use. So that's why separate layer, some distributed storage will be used for that data, not blockchain, because otherwise it will be so much burden on nodes of network that there will be no enough disk space for them. About fluctuations, so there is a fluctuation of price of Dash itself. Transaction price in Dash is actually quite low. It's not Bitcoin when at some point transaction fees went up to 50 euro. And with recent release of Dash, actually instant send fees were lowered 10 times. And by the way, if you send a transaction with no fee at all, it will eventually get through as well. Maybe a little bit slower, but our network is not overloaded. So miners still have incentive to sort transactions in the block to put transactions with highest fee first. But there is enough room for transactions without fee as well. So transaction fees are not a problem right now.
One final question. How much does it cost to run a master node?
The cost to run a master node is you have to freeze 1,000 Dash for that. And all remaining costs, like you need to have a computer running 24/7 or almost 24/7. You need to have an IP address. So the cost can be, that's it. And currently masternode fees, essentially now it's 6.8 Dash per month approximately for a master node. So it completely covers all of these costs.
We go on to the next question.
Yeah, sure. I have a question for the Deloitte lads. So it's all right. So it's quite nice for us from Cork to have other people in Ireland working, on the pulse of blockchain. But I think, like most people in the blockchain industry, I'm quite tired of the regurgitation of, key buzzwords and not much actually meaningful things being done. So you say that you have 50 POCs live. Could you just speak to what they are and how meaningful they are?
I guess you always said it.
All of them, I guess.
Great question. So the POCs, like anything when the lab first started, not just in Ireland but global, right? It was a case of spray and pray. Trying to find as many use cases as possible. Where can we fit in a blockchain? Where can we make money from? Traditional. Then, like anything else, there's a purge. There's a core focus. So we set up the lab with a core focus of financial services. That was the narrowing. So we moved on. KYC was the main one. We're doing a lot of work now, certification obviously, supply chain. We feel supply chain is going to be the next killer use case for Deloitte to profit on. Why? Because a good blockchain, a good supply chain is transparent. That's a key focus area. And not only that, it's cross industries. So supply chain obviously affects a range of different sectors, pharma being a major one. And Deloitte has a major presence in pharmaceuticals. Oil and gas, a major industry. I think Deloitte audits 30 of 42 global oil and gas companies. That's where we're focusing on.
How far off a first deployment would you say you are in terms of your technological development?
Check. Around oil and gas, you mean, or?
Well, supply chain was the example that you're
Yeah. So, what can I say? It's we are definitely engaging with every other single client that we have, and again, we have 150 offices around the world, and our spread is huge. But
well, where the huge spread? I just mean just one single use case that's close to
going to production.
Yeah.
The straight up answer to that would be none.
No,
Yes.
Say again, sorry.
What?
Get two mics. So DMVGL is our only live blockchain production.
Alright.
That's it.
But in terms of supply chain, there's
Yeah.
Supply chain?
No.
Okay. Like an approximation, 12 months, 24 months?
Look, it's always the thing about there are things happening, but we're always under NDAs, and it's hard for me to go into details. There's stuff happening, and you can take my word on that or not. Look.
So maybe we can talk afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
Is there any other questions?
Hi, this is a question for Oleg. All of the costs for like running a master node and the mining contribution of running a master node and the cost to submit a proposal, they're all denominated in Dash.
Yes.
So obviously they have had a massive appreciation over the last kind of year or two. So like, I suppose I could have run a master node last year for about 80,000. This year it's going to cost me like 800,000. Doesn't that give a massive advantage to the early adopters, and it pretty much shuts out any new adopters? And do you not think that that might actually lead to the same problems with Bitcoin, where the original developers are intransigent and unwilling to make any real changes, and there's no new people able to kind of muscle into that?
Okay, so of course, early adopters, like in any cryptocurrency, have advantage because they got some coins for cheaper, and then they cost much more. But for masternode owners, actually, stagnation is not a good thing. If you already invested this amount of money in this technology, you are interested in developing this technology, because otherwise it will stagnate and die off. And the good indication for that is that all proposals for financing Dash development team were voted for by masternodes. I'm not sure whether there were single votes against. I'm not sure. I looked at some voting for a recent proposal, and there was not a single vote against that. And we announced plans for big changes in Dash, and masternode owners still vote for that. So it appears that this self-financing system is beneficial for development. It doesn't go to stagnation. And the reason, of course, I'm not authorized to do any official statements because I'm just a technical person. But my personal opinion is that stagnation in Bitcoin is just because Bitcoin is not self-financing. So developers were subverted by some entities, and these entities dictate further development. And these entities were against scaling Bitcoin, and they were more for using overlay Lightning Network on top of this Bitcoin that will lead to more centralization. In Dash, we are not dependent on any investor money. We are self-financing. And masternode owners are interested in further development. And we already shown that breaking changes there is nothing wrong with that. They work and they don't cause any troubles. And if they cause troubles, we have a support mechanism to roll back some changes.
If we can take 2 more questions, as we're short on time, that would be great. So, does anybody have a question?
So another question to Oleg. If you look at the Dash DAO, what would you say? What did you learn from recent examples like the DAO, and what would you say are the advantages of your architecture?
The main advantage is, compared to other ICOs, is that we didn't do ICO. We didn't take investor money for some promise of something. Again, the money used for self-financing, masternodes vote for that, but they don't own this money. They know that if they vote against some proposal, it's not to save money, because this money don't go to masternodes. Interesting thing about this 10% that goes to proposals is if proposals don't completely cover the remaining amount of money accumulated through the months, this money just don't get emitted. That's it. So the only reason for masternode owners to vote against some proposal, there can be only two reasons. Again, this is my own opinion. So one of them is that there is enough proposals to cover all this amount of money, and there is not enough money for all proposals. And another reason is that masternode owners can see some proposal detrimental to Dash ecosystem. Then they will vote against.
One last question.
So we're actually going to take a question now from the live stream.
Yeah, sure.
So here's to the full 5 people that are watching from YouTube. One from Canada, one from the UK, and one from Switzerland. Bonsoir. This question comes from a user, and they ask towards Oleg from Dash. The question is, would a single global payment system, which you claim to be creating here, would that not constitute a technologically centralized system and therefore run into a weak link within your technology?
To have a centralized system, you need to have some center, you know. So we have a development team that is financed from blockchain. From development point of view, this constitutes some kind of centralization, but from running the network, it's completely decentralized. And it's interesting that if, for example, masternode owners are unhappy with what we are doing, they can reject next proposal for financing us. And if some other team comes that does stuff better, and they can vote for financing that other team. I don't see centralization here. The network is run completely distributed. There is no single owner. There is one legal entity that is Dash Foundation that is created specifically to hire contractors and to pay salaries legal way, so we can actually get salaries and pay our taxes. But this legal entity controls essentially nothing. You can create any other organization and be funded on the proposals exactly the same way as we do. So, if I understood this question correctly.
Yeah, I hope that answered your question. It's very weird to speak into a phone. Oleg, can I take this? Thanks for your presentation, guys. I hope everybody has learned something. Going to the Ferryman around the corner for a bit of networking and some drinks if you want to join us. And we're also hiring at the moment, so if you're interested, get in touch. Email's there, sorry, Deloitte. Bit of competition, but